Good afternoon. I'm Olivia Baldock-Ward from the Driving Instructors Association, and I'm joined today by my colleagues from NASP and the DVSA to get answers to some of the many questions we've been asked from our members. NASP is the National Association Strategic Partnership, who between us represent 3/4 of driver and rider trainers in the UK. NASP are also a Tier 1 stakeholder with the DVSA, plus we also have representation on the DfT Road Safety Delivery Group. NASP comprises of the ADI National Joint Council, Driving Instructors Association and the Motor Schools Association for GB. I'm joined today by Lynn Barry, Chair of the ADI NJC, and Peter Harvey, Chair of the MSA GB. The three associations each rotate who is in the chair currently. At the moment it is the DIA, and NASP would like to thank DVSA for attending this meeting today. I'll next introduce Mike Warner, who is the Senior External Affairs Manager at DVSA, who will in turn introduce his colleagues to DVSA. Mike.
Hello everybody, thank you very much for the invitation from NASP, really very much appreciated. In terms of who's joining us today, we've got some very familiar faces. We've got Mark McGee, Head of Driver Policy, Mark Wynn's joining us as Chief Driving Examiner, Jackie Turlin's on call as the ADI Registrar, and Nigel Robinson, ADI Endorsement Manager. Focus today, we're not really going to go over all the stuff you've already had. You've already had our standard operating procedures, the briefing pack, and the many communications that we've sent out directly to yourselves as ADIs. We're not going to go over all of that again. I know you want new information, not just to rehash the stuff we've already put out. So the main focus today is literally just to go straight into a Q&A and give you the answers that you need. So we're just going to jump straight into it.
Okay, thank you. So the first question today from us is, if we are to wear face coverings, will we be allowed to wear face visors to work? Would a candidate be allowed to wear one for a driving test, and would an examiner wear one?
Hello, I'm Mark Wynn, DVSA's Chief Driving Examiner, and this question falls to me. So as far as face coverings are concerned, each individual instructor will need to make their own mind up about the safety measures that they want to put in place for them as an individual as part of their running their business. As far as driving tests are concerned, we won't be issuing our staff with face shields, but we will allow a candidate to wear one if they choose. We will remind the candidate or point out to the candidate that this could increase the risk posed by if there was a collision, or by, for example, an airbag going off if they're wearing a face shield. But as far as, we won't stop them wearing them, but we don't recommend wearing them because of the reasons around airbags going off.
I think, Mark, you've answered the second part of my question as well. Are DVSA using and allowing visors on test? Is there anything else you wanted to say on that?
So that's the visor question, the face covering question. So thank you for helping me get it around the right way. So the face covering question, we will expect everybody to wear a face covering on test unless they've got a medical reason for not being able to wear one. If you've got a candidate, a pupil with a medical reason for not wearing a face covering, it's really important that you let us know at the point of booking the test so that we can make sure the examiner knows about it, and that we line up an examiner who is okay with taking a candidate out who hasn't got a face covering on.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is about test procedures. What will practical tests look like? And it's in two parts. And how do you think ADIs and pupils should prepare? Probably best for Mark, I would think.
Thank you, Peter. The test and the way we assess it isn't changing. So we want you to prepare in the way that you normally would. We want you to be driving to the same standard. Those training standards, the national standards that you get your pupils ready for, haven't changed. We still want them to show us that they can drive to a safe standard. So you don't need to change anything for that. There will be some different things going on before and after the test, but not as far as the way that they drive. So you need to help your candidates prepare by teaching them to drive safely.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I think, Mark, my next question is for you as well. How do ADIs manage the risk of examiners getting into their cars? Will they have their temperature taken down, for example?
So it's important that that the cars are kept nice and clean, and the advice, we follow the guidance that the government are giving all along about washing your hands frequently and things like that. Our standard operating procedure covers that. It's been reviewed by Public Health England to reduce the risk of contamination as far as we can through things like face covering and social distancing and regular hand washing. We don't expect ADIs or driving examiners to have their temperatures taken. The advice from Public Health England is that's not the best way of identifying and preventing the virus from spreading. So follow the rules and the guidance in our standard operating procedures should help us stick with that. Covers things like making sure that people self-isolate if they're displaying symptoms. And for that reason, we'll be making sure that we're involved in the track and trace. And we've updated our privacy notice so that we can share the information on the candidate details with the NHS track and trace service if a driving examiner tests positive for COVID-19. The NHS will then use that information if they need to tell you, the instructor, and your candidate that you need to self-isolate at home, so you just help stop the spread of the virus.
Thank you, Mark.
The next question, I think, is for Mark McGee. What will the coverage of tests be across the country? Should we advise members they may have to travel for tests?
Thank you, Lynn. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Mark McGee, Head of Driver Policy. Obviously, from next Monday, the 6th of July, all DVSA driving examiners that are able to will return to work. Obviously, we do have a very small number unable to do so due to health or caring responsibilities, but these are evenly spread across the country. Obviously, just to reiterate that obviously, as from next week, obviously we will continue to deliver key worker tests across England, Scotland and Wales, but obviously at the moment we have only announced a resumption date for tests in England. When the time comes, we will be unable to reopen all test centres. Obviously, we're checking them at the moment to make sure they're safe, obviously that, and implementing social distance measures. Obviously, that includes checks of the water and things like that to make sure there's no Legionella. What we will do is obviously share a list of all the effective test centres separately before resumption of border testing.
Thank you.
Mark, I think this one's probably for you as well. Is it safe to assume that there will be no accompanied tests for the foreseeable future?
Yes, as you're aware, Peter, obviously for the key worker tests, we have not allowed this to happen. And of course, we fully acknowledge that accompanying a candidate on test is important for both for themselves, but also for you in terms of your continuous professional development. Unfortunately, this is not possible at present, but it is something that we will keep under constant review.
Thank you.
Mark Wynne, I think this one's for you. Will extended tests still go ahead due to the extra time involved?
Yes, extended tests will still go ahead. All of our test slots now have got some increased time built into them. So we should be able to fit extended tests in without any problems at all. Okay,
thank you very much.
This is one for Mark McGee. Do we have to put our ADI certificate in the car for tests?
Whilst not mandatory, this is, I think for me personally and for our examiners, and I would also say for the ADI industry, this is probably more important than ever. If we have your number, we can pass your details to NHS Test and Trace in the event that one of our examiners does unfortunately test positive. Obviously, we all hope that that doesn't happen. But obviously, the NHS Test and Trace is a key part of the government response to COVID-19. And therefore, obviously, including your ADI certificate in the car should be just as important for your own health and safety as it is to everyone else's.
Okay.
This one, I think, is probably for Mark Wynne this time. Give you a break, Mark. It's about the show me, tell me questions, Mark. Will they still be going ahead at the beginning of the test? And if they are, would it be of any help that instructors maybe went forward, opened the bonnet, done those kind of things to save having to clean things twice? Would that be something that could be considered?
So yes, the show me, tell me questions will be going ahead as normal. We're not changing any of those. And whilst it's handy if the ADI is in the vicinity, we still want to maintain all that social distancing. So we do not want them to come and open the bonnet. The candidate should be able to do that in the normal way, providing the ADI is around so that if there's a problem that the examiner can't overcome, that they're nearby, we'll just carry on as normal.
Okay, thank you.
in regards to seat covers, I think this is one for you, Mark. What's DVSA's advice with this, covering disposable plastic or disposable and beaded seat covers?
Thanks, Eva. So as far as seat covers are concerned, you can see from our standard operating procedure that advice for DVSA staff is that they're discretionary for car tests. In other words, you can choose if you fit a disposable seat cover or not. But due to the risk of slips, trips and falls, then we won't be doing that for LGV tests, where it won't be happening. So you may see it in car tests, you are less likely to see it in LGV tests. If the instructor's got a seat cover fitted as part of their own arrangements, then this should be fine. It should be quite acceptable. But if it's, for example, if it's a particularly hot day and there's a discussion between the ADI and the examiner at the time, then that's fine. Generally got really good local relationships between examiners and ADIs. That sort of thing gets sorted out there. So hopefully that will be okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
I've got a question for Mark McGee. Under the current situation, should a test candidate be told that their driving test may be cancelled at noticeably short notice due to non-availability of the examiner because of COVID symptoms and another test rebooked? Under such circumstances, will the DVSA continue to pay the candidate out-of-pocket expenses?
I think given the extreme circumstances that we find ourselves in, and as we did do in March, when obviously we cancelled a lot of tests at fairly short notice, obviously for safety reasons, DVSA are not currently paying out-of-pocket expenses in relation to coronavirus. Obviously, in terms of our website, there is advice on there which obviously stipulates the circumstances in which we will. I think we have to acknowledge that we couldn't list every single eventuality, and obviously we didn't allow for this sort of thing, but clearly in the current climate I think it will be wrong to pay out-of-pocket expenses, but equally we will do our best obviously to honour test as much as possible. Obviously we will try and find another examiner if we can at short notice to deliver tests where that is possible.
Mark, this one's for you as well. I think looking towards the near future, if you like, it's to do with key worker tests. What's the provision going to be for them?
Key worker tests, as I said earlier, do continue. Obviously, critical workers can continue to apply for an emergency driving test through the online booking service. Obviously, Peter, I'm pretty sure you've got the email address, but obviously happy for that to be shared with your members going forward. Under phase 1, obviously, of testing, we will look to obviously increase the number of those tests that we deliver in the next couple of weeks to obviously try and get most of them done. But obviously we appreciate there are certain sectors out there at the moment who still have key workers who are looking for tests, particularly around the ambulance service, and we're still doing our best for them to make sure they get the service that they need.
Thank you.
Mike, one for you. Will the new procedures be added to the email confirming tests, the test date for the candidate?
Yeah, that's a comms thing. So yeah, absolutely. So set up a dedicated gov.uk page, which walks candidates through what they can expect on the test from both the booking side, right the way through booking, through the face covering, everything's on there. They'll need to know in terms of what their experience will be. We'll be adding a link to that on the candidate's email when that goes out.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mark McGee, question for you. Will waiting room facilities be available to candidates and instructors, including the toilets and the hand washing facilities?
As outlined in the stakeholder briefing pack, due to social distancing measures, we will be unable to open our test centre waiting rooms. Obviously, as you appreciate, different test centres are different sizes, and for some examples, where we've had to implement social distancing measures for our own staff, we've had to utilise the waiting rooms for desks, even in that capacity, and therefore reopening them to the wider public just isn't possible. Obviously, in terms of toilet facilities, again, from day one, the plan is only to allow them to make them available in exceptional circumstances for those who have a disability, medical condition or pregnancy. But we will keep this under review, obviously, as things develop, and obviously as we start with reducing social distancing measures, well, then obviously we will look to open them when we can.
Okay.
This one's for Mark Wynne. I think, Mark, one of the big complications around the country are outlying areas that have outstations. Would you know if they're going to open all the outstations at when the testing begins in whichever country it may be?
So yes, outstations will be opened as part of our plans for bringing testing back on, but we won't be able to open every test centre. There will be some that are not going to be ready for opening. It'll vary on a site-by-site basis. We want to make sure that every location is as safe as it can be, having been closed for a significant period of time. So we need to make sure that water supplies are safe and that the buildings are good to be used. We'll share a list of all the affected test centres separately.
Thank you, Mark. Good to hear.
This one's for Mark McGee. Can you explain what the cancellation process will be for tests if a candidate has late COVID-19 symptoms?
Yes, of course. Just a reminder that obviously the candidate must not come for their driving test if they or someone that they live with has coronavirus symptoms. Equally, they shouldn't come for tests if they've been told by the NHS Test and Trace Service that they've been in contact with a person who has coronavirus. Obviously, as at now, obviously we're waiting for further advice around the government around quarantine in terms of travel outside of the UK. So again, if somebody has entered or returned to the UK in the last 14 days, except in obviously limited situations, they also should not come for test. Obviously, the individual themselves should stay at home to self-isolate. They can change their driving test appointment if they need to on the day of the driving test. They can do that free of charge if they're self-isolating, and at short notice that can be done obviously within the 3 clear working days of the test that we would normally require.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Got one for Mike then. When will pupils who haven't booked tests be able to access the test booking system, taking into account those who are already in the system have priority?
Give Mark a break for a second. So in terms of on-hold candidates, so obviously our priority is the on-hold candidates who through no fault of their own or ours have been rescheduled repeatedly over the past few months. On-hold candidates will have priority to book their tests before we open the booking service to the general public. We'll be contacting all those on-hold candidates directly in batches to rebook their tests. That way we can avoid any strain on the systems or any crashes, etc. We don't currently have an estimated date for reopening of the public booking system, but we will update NASP and obviously through NASP ADIs directly as soon as we have that information available. In terms of when we're looking to do that, we're looking to start sending out the first batch of emails to on-hold candidates week commencing the 13th, and the first bookable slots are available on the 22nd of July.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You answered my question there. I was just simply going to ask when you were going to start sending the emails out to rebook. But you told me it's the 13th of July. That's fine. Thank you.
Week commencing 13th of July, yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
One for Mark Wynne. Will examiners still do 7 tests a day where possible for category B?
No, to start with, there won't be. To help us get the social distancing measures in place, we've had to change our examiners' programs to spread the tests out a little bit more. They'll also have different staggered working patterns. So they'll be delivering typically 5 tests per day with extended time between the tests to allow for fitting of PPE, hand washing and other hygiene matters. It also helps us to make sure that we haven't got too many people in the same place at the same time. So all going to help keep the environment safe for our staff, but also for the candidates.
Yes, thank you.
Mike, can I ask you please, what is the situation with the PCS union? Will examiners be going back to work on July the 22nd?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of we've been actively collaborating and consulting trade unions throughout the crisis, certainly from the very beginning, they've been consulted and engaged. Obviously, we've been doing critical worker tests throughout this period as well. So again, we've had lots of conversation with trade unions around our arrangements for that process. All driving examiners that are able, subject to health and care considerations, will return to work on the 6th of July.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, while you're there, this is a question about, could you tell us what DVSA have done to make it sure that it's safe for examiners to go back to work?
Oh, we can do better than that, Peter. We've shared the standard operating procedures with you very openly. Everything that we've got there has been shared with NASP on your website. So the full standard operating procedures there. We've had a massive mammoth operation of logistics over the past month or so to make sure all the PPE, the face coverings, the wipes, everything has been distributed across to about 400 test centres. So we've done that as a massive operation. Again, SOPs have been reviewed by Public Health England, they've been reviewed by the trade union. So we've done a huge amount of effort, both not only to make sure the systems are in place, but also to make sure our staff are comfortable and confident that those systems are in place. One thing to actually have it written down, it's another thing to actually convince and demonstrate that we've got their safety at heart.
Thank you.
Mark McGee, this is a question for you. This is a question we've all been asked many times. What is the news on theory test certificates? And are there going to be any extensions given?
The 2-year validity period of the theory test certificate is set out in legislation. Obviously, this is so that the candidates, both theoretical knowledge and their ability to obviously identify developing hazards remains current. To extend the validity would therefore require a legislative change. There's no news on it as at today. Hopefully we will be able to provide some information next week.
Thank you very much.
Mark, following on, will they be tranched like the practical tests?
No, the booking system for the theory tests is open for everyone to book a test from tomorrow, the 4th of July onwards.
That kind of answers my question, Mark. I was going to simply ask you when you would be able to start them.
The theory test centres in England will resume service, obviously on the 4th. That's all categories, including ADI Part 1 tests. Obviously, there may be a small number of appointments which will need to be rescheduled to accommodate social distancing measures, sort of in the early weeks or so, but obviously we will try to keep that to a minimum.
Lovely, thank you.
I think this one's been answered in the brief stakeholder briefing pack that was sent out, but Mike, you know, the arrangements for theory tests and so information has been put in there already, isn't it, for what pupils and trainees can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got it's in the briefing pack itself in terms of the COVID secure arrangements at test centres.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we've got the dedicated UK page for candidates. So again, they can see what to expect.
Lovely, thank you.
Mark, one for you here. This is from one of our members. Because practical tests have been cancelled and are on hold, my candidates' theories run out. What will happen?
I think, as I just said, Lynn, obviously we have no further news on an extension to the theory test certificate at this stage. Your pupil is entitled to a refund on their practical test booking. Obviously, that is an option that's open to them. Alternatively, they may ask DVSA to keep their booking on hold for a period of time while they repass the theory test. As you know, we are obviously moving all current bookings to hold, and obviously we'll be willing to do that, although obviously we won't be able to allocate them an actual slot at this stage until they've repassed their theory test.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is probably a question for Jackie. Quite long-winded. For the PDIs who have not on a trainee license stand, some of them are given lessons for free to people not in their household. Gov.uk suggests private practice can only be done with members of their household or those in their bubble. Does this mean that PDIs will have to use a trainee license route in order not to go against this rule? The way we're reading it makes it seem as if taking Part 3 without a trainee license wouldn't be possible.
Hello, I'm Jackie Turland, I'm the ADI Registrar. Enforcement of the restrictions remains a matter for police. Those not using a trainee licence scheme cannot legally charge money or money's worth for tuition, and that includes the covering of the cost of insurance, wear and tear on the car or fuel. It seems unlikely that anybody outside of the scheme would be teaching numbers of learner drivers who are not family members, because the cost of insurance alone might prove prohibitively expensive, or teaching learners could invalidate their own insurance policy. There's no requirement to hold a trainee licence to take a Part 3 test, but those who don't hold a licence will need to ensure that they adhere to the restrictions at the time in their region, which may require that they present for test with a family member or somebody in their bubble, and that person can be a full licence holder. Doesn't have to be a learner.
Thank you.
Jackie, is another one for you. What's the current situation concerning trainee licenses if the PDI did follow the correct requirements of the DVSA and sent back their certificate to the DVSA? Could you clarify this, please?
Yeah, if a trainee has demonstrated they're not using their license by destroying it, normally we would say return it, but we're not in the office, so they can't physically return it to us. Then I will take that into account whether or not to grant another one. This advice is on Gov UK. It's always been on Gov UK, and that advice has not changed. Demonstrate you're not using it, and you're more likely to get another one.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie, I have one for you as well, please. Why are some PDIs having to pay to get their pink licenses back, and some we've heard from are not having to pay?
Nobody has been given a free license. There's no legislative mechanism to waive the statutory fee. But rather than have trainees pay for a license that they knew they couldn't use, anybody who applied for a license from the 1st of March was offered the option to withdraw their application and receive a refund for it, so therefore they had no application, or they were advised and then advised to reapply, or we offered to hold the application for them and issue it at a later date. That advice was on their individual circumstances, and dependent on factors such as when they passed their Part 1 and the earliest date of their initial training, because there's no powers to overlook these regulatory requirements. Those who opted for the application to put on hold were issued with a licence with their new preferred date, and those who withdraw the application needed to make a fresh application, including paying the fee. So everybody's paid the fee, they just might have paid it at a different time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nigel, I think this may be for you to do with enforcement. It's about ADI Part 3 and standards checks. Do you know what's happening with them? Are they likely to go ahead, or what?
Yeah, well, as you can appreciate, we are implementing some additional control measures to reduce the risk to everyone taking these tests. Our SOP is not yet finalised. We have had feedback from Public Health England, and we'll announce a date for the resumption of these tests shortly. We're unable to confirm a date or SOP arrangements at this time, but we would like to take this opportunity to bust the myth, or the popular myth, that will not be reallocating ADI enforcement staff to support driving tests. Part 3 and standards checks will resume imminently. We will confirm the details as soon as possible.
Thank you, Nigel.
Mike, I think this might be one for you for Scotland and Wales. Do you have any updates for when they can return to training and testing?
Nothing at the moment, unfortunately. We do have regular contact with devolved administrations, so regular contact with Scotland and with Wales, and those conversations continue. We do get a heads up in terms of what we're looking for, what we're expecting, but so far we haven't got any indications or nothing I can share at this time.
Okay, thank you so much.
All I can say is in terms of, if I can just carry on with that, I suppose the point I'd make is DVSA covers Great Britain as a whole. So anything we're introducing in England, we'd be looking to introduce similar measures across England and across Scotland and Wales.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, another one for you here. When tuition and testing resumes in Scotland, it's most likely that the current NHS advice on COVID-19 will remain in force for some considerable time. So, for example, if you have any symptoms of COVID-19, self-isolate and request a COVID test. Will the DVSA therefore continue to accept short notice candidate cancellations without incurring another test fee, or will a medical certificate be required?
No, exactly the same arrangements that apply in Great Britain will apply across Scotland and Wales as soon as their local regional arrangements are lifted. So as soon as, so again, we want to make sure that if someone is having symptoms, they have the confidence that they can reschedule or cancel their test at short notice, even within the 3 days or on the day. It's important they don't turn up for a test if they're displaying symptoms.
Okay.
Hi, Mike. I think this one's for you as well. What's the DVSA's advice going to be for parts of the country that unfortunately finish up back in lockdown again, like Leicester, for instance?
It's a good question, a very good question, and one we've been grappling with ourselves. Obviously, it's slightly different at the moment because we're not actually restarted. I suppose the key question is how would we react when obviously we're back to full service. Obviously, seen our recent messages regarding Leicester. Obviously, put some messages out about that yesterday. Our services have reverted to critical workers only, and driving and riding instruction is limited to critical workers preparing for a test until after those restrictions are lifted. In terms of each case that's specific for Leicester, we'll assess local lockdowns on a case-by-case basis. At the moment, obviously, we're focusing on Leicester, but we are preparing for others as time goes on.
Thank you.
Mike, I think another one for you. Are police being updated so fines, etc., don't occur?
You'll recall that we discussed this ourselves with NASP in terms of we shared some information with the National Police Chiefs Council early on in our response, so that they had good guidance from ourselves around compliance, etc. This is where we're at now. This has been addressed by central government as part of the weekly COVID-19 update of public services. So they send a regular update out to all police forces. Our service resumption has been widely covered as part of that and in local media.
Okay, thank you.
Another one, Mike, if DVSA can trace that one of their examiners contracted the virus from our pupil on test, what action will DVSA be taking? Will they sue the ADI or pupil? And who's responsible, the instructor or the pupil?
Wow, that's a question, isn't it? No, I suppose the answer, take it back a little. I suppose test and trace, it's about preventing onward transmission and public health. It's not about liability. This is about all of us working together, making sure that we follow the best possible practical standards of PPE, hygiene, social distancing to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Know that we're not looking to sue an ADI, track who's responsible, and even tracking would be difficult. It could be multiple sources of where an individual caught it from. So no, I think the key point is we would be looking to work with test and trace to make sure that people are alerted, but that's as far as it goes, really.
Okay.
Good to hear. This one I think is probably going to be for Mark McGee. Lots of instructors are very concerned about seeing people out doing private practice, Mark. Is there any news from you about people, the legality of people taking lessons in their private cars?
Yeah, private practice is permitted, obviously, as long as the person sort of acting as supervisor and driver is from either the same household or from the candidates, obviously a bubble. Obviously, I see obviously the question was about private practice. Obviously, if there is ever a situation where an ADI is obviously asked to give lessons in the individual's car rather than their own, then obviously that is clearly a matter for ADIs to determine whether or not they wish to do that, whether or not it's safe to do so. I think the only other thing to stress is that obviously the SOP that Mark has alluded to and which is published, including the cleanliness of the vehicle, applies equally to all cars presented for tests. Obviously, it's not just ADIs who will be treated in terms of just checking the vehicle for cleanliness, but obviously we need to get those messages out to candidates who might be private runners as well, and obviously that will be part of the gov.uk advice that's been published.
Yeah, obviously after tomorrow it's only going to count in the other parts of the country, in Scotland, England, Scotland and Wales.
Yes.
I've got another question. This one I think is probably going to be for Mike. I need to read a little bit of the background to you first, Mike, and then we get to the question.
Okay.
So all driver training services are allowed to resume business from the 4th of July in England in line with step 3 of the UK government COVID-19 strategy. In that document, it states, in order to facilitate the fastest possible reopening of these types of higher risk businesses and public places, the government will carefully phase and pilot reopens to test their ability to adopt the new COVID-19 secure guidelines. The government will also monitor carefully the effects of reopening other similar establishments elsewhere in the world as this happens. Now the question. So the question is, please can the DVSA advise how the resumption of all driver training services on the same day fits in with this statement? And secondly, please can the DVSA share their findings so far on the reopening of driver training services in all other countries? Nice easy one for you.
So just to recap in terms of the question, how is it we're resuming services? How does that fit in with a phased return? And what have we done in terms of learning from other countries? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I suppose we've always had a phased return. We've been doing critical worker tests from very early on in the pandemic. So throughout the pandemic, we've done critical worker tests. These have been evenly spread across the country, including car, rider, vocational tests, so across all the different sectors. The standard operating procedures, they were carefully designed, they were multidisciplinary, so we've worked with HR, health and safety, trade unions, estates, obviously communications, policy. So that's been a huge multidisciplinary effort to make sure that we've got the right procedures in place covering all the aspects. SOPs were reviewed by Public Health England. We've maintained regular discussion with the trade unions and frontline staff. Again, bear in mind those frontline staff for the past 3 months have been volunteering to do those critical worker tests. So we've made sure we've got good dialogue, good conversations with them to gather feedback, find out what's working, what isn't working, what their concerns might be, how can we address that properly. So we continuously improve those processes. In terms of phasing, so that's probably the first bit in terms of the past few months. We're continuing to phase 6th of July to the 21st of July. We're continuing to try and clear the critical worker list, operating reduced number of tests per day on a staggered basis. I'd suggest that that is a phased reopening in line with the UK government recovery strategy. I think that's a phased manner. In terms of other countries, we have good representation on CIACA. That's the International Commission for Driver Testing. They've got 71 members from 39 countries, so we have very active representation on there. So we've worked with CIACA to get full understanding of what the services have been affected and how they're looking to resume services. Other countries have resumed services by putting certain measures in place, very similar to DVSA, providing PPE, advice on air conditioning, face coverings, seat coverings, gloves, etc. We continue to have those conversations with CIACA and we'll monitor as things move forward. But yes, we're a very active member of the CIACA group.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question? It was a very big question. I hope I've covered everything.
That was very good. Thank you.
Okay.
A bit shorter question for you, Mike. It's actually the last question as well. When will instructors be able to book tests for their existing clients?
Okay, so existing clients being two really. So as said earlier, on hold candidates have the priority to book their test slots before we open up the public booking system. We will contact them in batches, let them know they can book, etc. And we will encourage them to talk to their ADI to make sure the ADI is available, to make sure they're ready for tests, etc. We currently don't have an estimated date for reopening the public booking system. So those that aren't currently known to us, we don't currently have any sort of estimated date as to when we can resume that. But we'll keep you updated as time goes on. We'll give you plenty of notice about what date we're aiming for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so wrapping up, I think we're coming towards the end of the session now. So as it comes to towards the end of the session, we'd like to again thank DVSA for their time and for answering our questions honestly. Got lots of questions, as I say, from all of our members, and we'll undoubtedly get more questions from our members as the days go on, as a lot of people resume training and testing next week, training rather, and we will liaise with DVSA with any more questions and publish further ones on the NASP website. Has anyone got anything else to add before we wrap up?
I think just from me, Olivia, obviously on behalf of DVSA, I would like to thank NASP and certainly the individuals on the call today and Carly for obviously what they've done over the last 3 to 4 months in terms of trying to obviously help promote what instructors should and should not be doing, obviously particularly through the NASP website. Particularly grateful for what's gone on there. I'm grateful obviously for the updated guidance that you published yesterday. We're very much appreciative. I think you probably do recognise, obviously deep down, that in terms of some of the comms, it's been quite challenging for us in terms of getting the approvals. And obviously we're still in that position a little bit, given with obviously with the Part 3 and standards check time scales, because we're still getting all the ticks in those boxes to be able to announce something. But hopefully we'll get something out to you early next week.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you again on behalf of all of us at NASP. It's been a really great session. Thank you for your time, and we're gonna wrap up now. So thank you.
Thanks very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.